Greg, did you do Top Shot at all?
No, I did. I did not. I
was
right
back.
I was into it a little bit, a little earlier in the year, and then I just kind of lost interest.
Okay.
My brother made some money on it.
I'm still very much invested in it.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right.
It is the Awesemo NFL Tournament Strategy Show, and if there's ever a slate where we need some strategy for anything right now, this is it. There are players getting ruled out left and right. There's a ton of value, and also just a lot of odd, interesting situations overall. All the more reason you guys like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're going to go through all the news that we have right now and all the different tournament options, but things are very much subject to change at this point in the season. And that's more stuff that's going to be covered when we have our 4.5 hour live before lock tomorrow. So guys are going to want to check that out. Until then, I am joined with Neil, who former and current millionaire maker winner over on DraftKings. And hopefully one of us could win another $1 million this week. But Neil, what do we make of this slate?
This is it's a tough one to break down a little bit, not just because of all the changing parts, but because there aren't as many like slam dunk plays. I feel like a lot of weeks we have plays where you look at the boom bust tool and like the positive leverage on some of the players is off the charts. We don't have that many players on this slate. It's kind of nuanced in that nobody is projected for really, really high ownership, or very, very few players are projected for a ton of ownership. And then very few players have really high positive leverage scores. So it'll be a pretty nuanced, interesting slate as of right now. Obviously, as I mentioned, there are going to be changing parts. We're going to get some injury news that are going to shake things up. But yeah, for now, it's a slate where, you know, you don't feel, at least for me, I don't feel that great about any individual plays. I feel like I'm going to be pretty spread out as it stands right now. Do you have anybody that you're really honing in on, or do you think you're going to be pretty spread out as well?
Well, I think it's going to be spread out. And the other thing, too, is I think there's a good chance that players that I like now are going to look different by the time tomorrow rolls around. But in terms of what you said about ownership, too, should I just give the people the benefit of the doubt and assume that they've liked this video and also become a member of our YouTube channel and just give them some of the most owned plays of the week, just so we kind of give them an idea of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, let's give them the benefit of doubt.
All right, well, give them benefit of the doubt. I'm assuming you guys have liked this video and you've subscribed to the channel. I don't have any way of checking that right now, but I'm just going to give you guys the benefit of the doubt, especially people who are watching after the fact. But usually at this time of the week, we have a few guys that are super chalky plays. Today, at least on DraftKings, as it stands, there's 4 players projected for over 20% ownership. One of them, James Robinson, projected for over 30%. I wouldn't even know if he's going to play tomorrow as of right now. But as of right now, he is the chalk of the slate, 31.6% projected ownership. Then we have Devontae Parker, 28.3, Adams, 26.3, Stephon Diggs at 20.1. That's over on ZK. On FanDuel, we have 2 players projected for over 30% ownership. And usually because of the pricing structure on FanDuel, the ownership ends up being a little bit more condensed. But right now we have James Robinson projected for 32.6% ownership. We've got Devontae Adams projected for 36.1. So to get back to what you were saying before, not that many popular plays. Also Deebo Samuel and George Kittle project for over 25% ownership on FanDuel. It's going to be spread out. I don't think we're going to be too concerned with some of the individual ownerships. And that is something to keep in mind as we build lineups this week. But let's start to get into some of the positions. And I just want to start by asking you about the overall top stacks and quarterback position. And just starting off right here, if you could, if you're starting to make your lineups, who are some of the quarterbacks you're really looking to build around?
So Kyler, I'm always looking to build around Kyler a little bit. I think Aaron Rodgers looks really interesting to me against the Ravens. He's just not projected for a ton of ownership. We currently have Aaron Rodgers. We just got an update, so I have my sheet on one side and now the update on the other side. So I'm going to read. We now have up to 5.1% projected ownership for Aaron Rodgers. It's a little bit higher than when I was putting in my research earlier, but I still like Aaron Rodgers at 5.1% ownership. I think that that's a stack that could do really well against the Ravens. We've got not only Devontae Adams, but also MVS looks really good today in the Boom Bust Duel, which surprised me a little bit. I don't think of him as a player. I mean, he is a player that's always had some boom upside, but his price has come up a little bit. So it kind of surprised me a little bit to see that he looked good today, but he does. And I'm not afraid to play MVS against the Ravens. So those are a couple of the guys that look really interesting to me. Tua is a player that looks really interesting. Now they're missing Jalen Waddle, so he'll be a little bit more concentrated in his receiving options. There's a lot of Lamar Jackson you can play, pretty low ownership. Anybody that's really standing out to you?
I mean, just looking at it to start, and I mean, it's also hard to not have some of the COVID situations influence some of this, especially when you looked at, we had on the top stack still, and we had the Rams were projected with a 20% chance to be the top overall stack on the slate. But now, I mean, looking at some of these quarterbacks that we have here on this slate, I really did like Aaron Rodgers and the Packers stacks a ton as a contrarian look. And if I remember correctly, when I did the top stacks lineup building show yesterday, I think he was projected for 1 or 2% ownership at the time. And as you just said, that number's gone up a little bit. I still don't have an issue with it, but it's still a number that's certainly a little bit more, I think, fair than what it was yesterday. Because yesterday when I was looking, I was like, oh, this is one of my favorite contrarian stacks of the season. Now the ownership's kind of there. So that's something that's not going to look quite as appealing to me. I'll probably be a little bit more in line. Kind of curious to look at some of these lower owned quarterbacks, though, and some of the potential just rushing quarterbacks, any of them, whether it's, like Cam Newton or, I guess, primarily Cam Newton, that you'd be looking to run naked for this week.
Yeah, so Cam looks really good in the tools. In the Boom Bust tool, we have him projected for 2.5% ownership, but a 3.8% boom probability, 5.4% optimal lineup probability. The Bills are going to put up some points, so probably they're going to have to be throwing late. He is only 1.6% top stack probability is the latest that I've seen. Maybe I need to refresh the top stack tool as well, but it's slightly positive leverage. Actually, no, that's no longer positive leverage on the 2.5, the new ownership. I still think that I'll play some Cam Newton just because I think that he is a quarterback with enough variance that he can have a really big game at 5,400. It scares me because he has been benched the past 2 weeks, and he is playing a pretty good Bills defense, but it's a spot that nobody else is going to get to. I think that he's a good enough quarterback at a cheap enough price tag that I'm probably going to get to above the 2.5% projected ownership that we have right now. And I think that I am going to, you can stack him pretty easily with DJ Moore, always looks good. Robbie Anderson, I think, has been in 2 Millie Maker winning lineups this year, despite not doing great in either of those. I'm probably not going to be going there too much. It's probably going to be mostly DJ Moore for me. Do you think you're going to play any Cam?
A little bit. And I'm also just kind of trying to rerun some lineups in Fantasy Cruncher, just given the ownership updates. And then also, this is only a 9-game slate at this point. And we very rarely see full NFL slates that are 9 games. Obviously, playoff slates look a little bit different. But 9-game NFL slates on a Sunday, that doesn't happen all that often. Does it change anything about your process?
The fact that it's 9 games, not really. It's still a big enough slate that I'm not going to be playing quarterbacks against defenses or any of the crazy stuff that I do on like a 3-game slate. I think that I'm going to be pretty spread out in my ownership. Yeah, I don't think that 9 games versus 11 or 12 is really going to change anything for me. Do you think you're going to hone your process, change it at all relative to a full main slate?
I'll probably be a little bit less spread out at quarterback because there's less options to choose from. The guys at the bottom that are like, I'm not dying to roster Mike Glennon, even if he looks okay in the boom bust tool. So I'm going to have some quarterbacks, say like Tua Tagovailoa, who I'm just kind of running lineups now to see who comes out most for me, given my process in the latest ownership run. And it does look like Tua is a quarterback I would be getting to quite a bit, and probably more than I'd get to on most slates just because of the size of the slate. But we've got Devontae Parker as one of the better individual value wide receivers on the slate. A lot of people are going to be getting to him in tournaments. And I think then we have to look at Tua from a quarterback perspective. He's currently projected for sub 10% ownership. And I think that's probably a number I'm going to be overweight to the field on because, number one, he individually looks like a pretty good play. We like some of his pass catchers, good points per dollar plays. And then you could just kind of roster whoever you want as pay-up options around those Dolphin stacks. So that's something that looks appealing to me from a lineup construction standpoint.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think both Adam Scher and Jordan Cooper, I listen to their shows frequently, and both of them talk about how they like to sometimes, if you have a chalky wide receiver, but the quarterback isn't really chalky, that can be a way to get different, is just when you're playing that chalky wide receiver, throw in the quarterback. And Devontae Parker is looking really chalky this week. So I think it makes sense to throw Tua into a lot of those stacks. And he looks independent of the receivers. He just looks good in the boom bust tool. 9.6% projected ownership, 11.8% boom probability, 14.2% optimal lineup probability. So I think that Tua looks really good against the Jets at 5,700. So yeah, I really like Tua this week.
And then kind of by the same logic, I don't like this guy as much as I like Tua, but Jimmy Garoppolo, George Kittle, and Deebo Samuel individually are both of really strong plays. And somebody who, when I was talking about Deebo on the Top Stack show yesterday, I think Deebo's probably one of the players we've hit on most this year because there's been a lot of days or a lot of slates where I've kind of just played Deebo because of what his projection is, where it's like, I'm getting so much Deebo, I never quite feel comfortable with it. I don't know if it's been the same case with you, but I'm like, we haven't projected so high. I'll just kind of ride with it. And he keeps putting up these massive fantasy performances. But Garoppolo is another one, projected for around 5% ownership. If I like Deebo Samuel and George Kittle individually, it's not like Garoppolo throws the ball or spreads it out to that many guys. So I think both of them make sense as plays, and that kind of gets me onto Garoppolo more as well.
Yep, I have the same thought. His ownership has come up a little bit since early. It's up to 7.3% projected ownership now in the boom bust tool. But I still think that he's a solid play, and I think that I'm going to be playing those receivers. So it makes some sense to play some Jimmy G, especially against the Falcons. They're just, any team can score against the Falcons in any way. So I think it wouldn't be surprising if the Niners, especially, we'll see what happens with their running back situation. They might be forced to throw a little bit more than they want to. I guess they could always run it with Deebo, which they've been doing plenty of. But I like taking shots on Jimmy Garoppolo and just hope that they get there through the air because I expect that they're going to put up some points against the Falcons.
Yeah, and then because you'd mentioned Kyler Murray before, in terms of Kyler Murray versus Josh Allen, I just like the pass catchers for Kyler Murray better because now that we have Hopkins out of the mix for Arizona, could it be a Rondale Moore week? Potentially, but I also think Christian Kirk gets a bump, and all these guys are so drastically underpriced. It's really easy to find a lot of upside targeting Kyler Murray and stacking with one of his wide receivers. You'd mentioned liking Kyler before. Who do you think would be the guy that you're pairing with him most often?
Probably Rondale Moore is going to be, he looked the best in our tools, I believe. And I'm scrolling down to wide receivers. Yeah, Rondale Moore looks phenomenal in our tools. Christian Kirk and AJ Green are both like pretty neutral plays in our tools, but I'm still going to be playing plenty of them. I just think that the Cardinals are going to be putting up a lot of points. I don't know if I'm going to be playing two receivers with Kyler just because he can do it on the ground as well. I think I'm going to be likely just doing single stacks for the most part, but maybe I'll do some double stacks. But I think Rondale Moore is my favorite of those receiving options. Zach Ertz also looks pretty good. I thought that he was hurt. He doesn't have an injury designation on DraftKings. Maybe he's healthy now, but I thought I had seen that he was hurt. So we'll keep an eye on it. But I think Rondale Moore, Zach Ertz both look interesting to me.
So Zach Ertz, he does have a hamstring injury. He's officially listed as questionable to play this week.
Oh.
However, he practiced on Wednesday, or he missed practice on Wednesday and Thursday, full practice on Friday, which leads me to believe he's going to be playing. So the indications are that Ertz will be available, even though he's officially listed as questionable. As for other QBs, Josh Allen is the other one I think warrants some consideration. The one thing that's been difficult about the Buffalo Bills this year is, other than just being really inconsistent and generally kind of sucking when they play against good teams, it's hard to know where they're going to be throwing the ball to, because Stephon Diggs has seen a downtick this year in his overall effectiveness. Cole Beasley's been really hit or miss. Then you got guys like Emmanuel Sanders. Gabriel Davis has randomly popped some upside. Dawson Knox, he's been more of a threat. So I look at Josh Allen as being probably the highest upside individual quarterback on the slate, but I get a little scared off him just because I have no clue who I want to stack him with.
Yeah, I'm in kind of the same boat. None of these guys look great in the boom bust tool in terms of leverage scores. They all look like they have decent enough. I mean, Stephon Diggs, 11.5% chance of being optimal. Cole Beasley, 10.8% chance of being optimal. Gabe Davis, up to 8.4% chance of being optimal. I think that Gabriel Davis is the one that is the most interested in me, despite having the most negative leverage. He is 3,700, and he's just been coming on. They've been giving him a lot more opportunities recently. He's a good enough receiver that I'll be taking some shots there. And I think it makes sense that in your Gabriel Davis lineups to pair him with Josh Allen. But yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's just they spread it out so much that you can't be as confident as you can be with someone like Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. You don't really know where Josh Allen is going, but I think that you can sprinkle these guys in your lineups with Josh Allen. Do you think you'll be doing run backs there? I mean, I know that I like DJ Moore as an option, so you could just run it back with DJ Moore, but I'm not sure that you really need to in a game with that big of a spread. Do you think you'll be doing any Josh Allen with no run backs, or are you going to force it in?
Let's see. I could just look at my lineups right now, and I'm kind of curious to see in the lineups I've built who ends up coming back as a run back in some of those lineups. DJ Moore is in about 20% of the lineups, although I didn't force a run back in Bill stacks, and it just kind of got to some of them naturally. But see, so DJ Moore in some of them. Mostly just DJ Moore. There's nobody else I'm getting a significant amount of. So just based on the projections and where some of these players look, I don't think I would be forcing it. The other issue too is, you get one of those games for Cam Newton where he throws for 130 yards, then rushes for like 30 yards and 2 touchdowns, and just all of his options kind of suck. Yep. So it is really hard to confidently say I want to run back in those Bills lineups. And as much as I've made fun of the Bills this year and how overrated I think they've been by sportsbooks this year, until like 2 weeks ago, they were the favorite to win the Super Bowl, and we had Josh Allen as an MVP frontrunner, and they've won one game against a team with a winning record this year. They are 13-point favorites against the Panthers in a game with a fairly low total. So it's not like we're projecting the Panthers to score very many points in this game.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Which, yeah, I think that they'll be one of the few stacks where I don't force a run back. I typically do. I typically force one pass catching option with my quarterback and one run back, but I do think this is a spot where I might not do that, just because I'll probably still have plenty of DJ Moore in my Josh Allen lineups. Maybe I'll give DJ Moore a little boost in my Josh Allen lineups, but I could see it happening. As you said, that's a really good point about Cam Newton being able to do a lot of it himself. So, the run back options you could get to on the other side aren't going to get there, even if Carolina does put up some points, because Cam Newton just does it. So I think that's a good thought to Josh Allen just without any run back makes a lot of sense.
We have a super chat here from Scarecrow6. He's saying, Neil, appreciate your insights, and directed at me, Greg. Your tweets are fire. 2 fire emojis. Appreciate you, Scarecrow, and thank you for the super chat. Very much appreciated. I think we've kind of hit on all the quarterbacks that are important to me for this slate. Is there anything else you want to add it from the position?
Not really. Nobody's really standing out to me. I might throw some Teddy Bridgewater out there just because we've got the Broncos receivers look pretty good in our tools. So maybe I'll be doing some Teddy Bridgewater, although I tried that last week and it didn't really go that well. I thought Teddy Bridgewater against the Lions made some sense, and then they just ran it in every time. I think that we've pretty much hit on everybody that I have significant interest in. Like I said, I'm going to be spread out. Sounds like you are as well. Trevor Lawrence kind of interests me just because everybody's going to James Robinson. I guess I'll throw that out there. I kind of like Trevor Lawrence as a pivot off of the chalky James Robinson, it wouldn't be that surprising to see the Jaguars try to do it through the air, feature their young quarterback. So I kind of like Trevor Lawrence. Do you have any interest there?
I didn't, but I actually really like your logic there. And I think part of it too is when I was just running lineups before, it got to so much of James Robinson that limited the amount of Trevor Lawrence that I was getting to. But I think that line of thinking makes a whole lot of sense. And that is actually something that's going to make me change some of the builds I have for tomorrow. I really like that as just an overall, tournament gameplay strategy. Because if we get Trevor Lawrence, maybe one of his pass catchers, and maybe that's where the touchdowns go instead of James Robinson, that would certainly offer some leverage. And we could get to the running back position now. And I think this is a good transition just to talk about James Robinson. Here's the situation with him. He's not been practicing this week. It appears he's going to be playing anyway. We don't know that 100% for sure, but the assumption is that James Robinson's going to be playing. Excellent matchup on paper against the Houston Texans. We also have Carlos Hyde out for the Jaguars. So there's been times we saw with Urban Meyer at coach, he would kind of split snaps at running back, but there's no Carlos Hyde and there's no Urban Meyer. How is that going to impact the team? I assume that James Robinson is going to be the guy. Reports seem to indicate that it's going to be James Robinson. But what do you think of his workload this weekend?
Yeah, so I agree that is the most likely scenario. I think that they're going to try to get James Robinson more involved. Trevor Lawrence has come out and backed James Robinson, says he's talented. We need to get him the ball more. So it would be sort of surprising to me if they don't want to get James Robinson more involved, but that doesn't mean that that's what's going to actually happen. They might also, like I said, they might want to feature their rookie quarterback in a new system, try some different looks for Trevor Lawrence. That wouldn't be that surprising either against the Texans defense. So I think I'm going to be playing plenty of James Robinson. Don't get me wrong. If he plays, I think I'm going to be playing plenty of James Robinson. But I also think he's not somebody that I'm going to be locking in there. He actually looks really positive in the boom bust tool with the update, especially. We're projecting him for 31.6% ownership, which is a lot. It's by far the most of any running back that we are looking at. But 37.3% boom probability, 47.9% optimal lineup probability. That's really high. So I think I'm going to be playing a lot of James Robinson. Do you have any reservations if he does play?
I have reservations that his ownership is going to be that low. I have a feeling he's going to be much more popular than that. We'll see what kind of updates come tomorrow, especially, on our 4.5 hour live before lock show. I assume he's going to get to be more popular. If this ownership holds, then certainly, yes, I want to be well over the weights of the field on him. I think he's a must play. Well, if we're not talking about cash games, but in cash games, you're going to have to play, in my opinion. Tournaments, as of right now, I'm going to want to be overweight to the field on that number. Love the matchup against the Texans. And he's just not competing with anybody else for snaps. One thing that's kind of annoying to me whenever I talk about James Robinson, before the season started, I was just projecting that the Jaguars backfield is going to be a timeshare. So I had bet the unders before the season started on Travis Etienne and on James Robinson rushing yards. And then what happens right after I bet it, Etienne gets hurt. So as a result, now that bet ends up getting voided, and Robinson just is going to end up losing. He's going to smash the over on his rushing yards, even though he isn't there yet, but he's probably going to surpass it this week. But that aside, I have to assume James Robinson is going to be the number one overall value play for me at running back this week. If you're looking to pivot anywhere, is there anybody you look at as a cheap running back that's even comparable to James Robinson?
I don't think so. I don't think there's anybody that's nearly as good as James Robinson. We're going to have to see what happens with the Cardinals running back situation because something could open up there. If James Conner and Chase Edmonds both play, then I don't think, that they're going to eat into each other if one of them is out. So James Conner is currently questionable. Chase Edmonds, I don't think he has been designated for return from the IR yet. I could be wrong about that, but I believe he's still on the IR, but could come back tomorrow. So if James Conner is out and Chase Edmonds does return, I'll have some interest in Chase Edmonds. Eno Benjamin, I think if either James Conner or Chase Edmonds is out, I will have some interest in Eno Benjamin. Particularly if James Conner is out, because we've seen, Eno Benjamin hasn't really been a huge factor the past several weeks with Chase Edmonds out and James Conner in. So I'm not going to have a ton of interest in him if nothing changes. But if James Conner is out or, the reports are that he's hobbled at all, then maybe my interest in Eno Benjamin will go up at all. But in general, no, nobody really comes close to James Robinson among the cheap running backs. Jeff Wilson's, no, yet. I say that, and then I'm like, no, I say that he's 6.1% boom probability. That's nowhere near James Robinson. So really the answer is no. Do you have anybody else in that range that you're thinking is anywhere near the same level as James Robinson?
Not really. And if you just run our lineups unencumbered and just be like, here, give me the optimal lineups, you're going to get James Robinson in all of them based on our projections on both FanDuel and DraftKings. He's going to come up with a lot of lineups. And I don't really have an issue with that. I think, especially considering our current projection on the ownership and all that, I love getting to James Robinson. If I'm looking for some other guys to play at running back, I certainly think there are other guys to get to, although not quite in the same price range. I know Saquon Barkley was somebody who you would like a bit last week. I didn't really like him last week. He ended up having a good game, not great. I kind of think his situation where you weren't right, I wasn't wrong, just somewhere in between. I think if you played Saquon Barkley, you were fine with those results, but he didn't break the slate or anything. But they did give him the ball a bunch of times. He saw 16 carries, which I believe is tied for the most he's had the entire season. And it seems like even with the Giants' place in the standings, they're going to be giving the ball to Saquon Barkley a lot. I do think there's a situation with the Giants here where Barkley's been hurt for so much of the last couple of years, and they're trying to figure out whether they want to sign him long term. I do think the Giants are maybe a little bit motivated to give extended playing time to Saquon Barkley just to see what they have from him right now from a health standpoint. So I don't know if that's a narrative you buy into, but it is something that I'm going to certainly consider. And I think will have me getting to more of Saquon Barkley than I have in previous weeks.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't really given much thought to that narrative. I didn't even realize that this was a contract year for Saquon Barkley. But that is an interesting thought for sure. Playing against a division rival, probably want to see if you can do it against the Cowboys. He doesn't look great in the tools. So we have projected for 17.8% ownership, 6.5% boom probability, 12.3% optimal lineup probability. So, I mean, that's not bad. 12.3% optimal lineup probability is pretty high. So I shouldn't say he doesn't look bad in the tools. He just has slight negative leverage relative to that 17.8% projected ownership. But yeah, if you think they're going to be forcing the ball into him, I think that, the Cowboys are a good defense, but it's not like Saquon Barkley can't do it against the Cowboys. Yeah, I have some interest there for sure at 6,500.
All right. I want to ask you, what are you doing with the stupid Detroit Lions and their running back situation? Because DeAndre Swift, he's out with a shoulder injury. Then you've got Jamal Williams. He's now been placed on the COVID list. Are they going to go back to Craig Reynolds? I know I had some of Jamar Jefferson in my lineups last week. I felt like a total idiot for that after the fact. I don't know if you were in the same boat as me with some exposure to him. But could we see another big game from Craig Reynolds? He did get a pretty good workload last week.
Yeah, so Jamal Williams is on the COVID list. Under the new rules, I think it's possible that he returns if he tests negative. That's my understanding of that situation, that there's at least some possibility that Jamal Williams comes back. If he does, then I think Jamal Williams would be the only one I would consider playing. If Jamal Williams is still on the COVID list tomorrow, yeah, I guess I was in the same boat as you. I played a lot of, I think I had about 10% Godwin, Igwebuike and 10% Jamar Jefferson. That didn't go well. Igwebuike also actually got some opportunities last week. I don't think Jamar Jefferson got a rush. Am I wrong about that? I was just looking at it earlier. Maybe I just was seeing the wrong box score. But yeah, I think they're playable. I think Craig Reynolds would be my number one there. Godwin would be my number two, and I think Jamar Jefferson would be my number three. Yeah, I felt especially foolish last week because I didn't play any Craig Reynolds. I did all my DraftKings lineups, and then the news came out that Craig Reynolds was expected to have a big workload, and I was like, never even heard of this guy. I don't know where he's coming from. I didn't factor that in at all. So I had a lot of the other two and not the one who actually had the most opportunities. Against the Cardinals, I don't love any of them, but they are so cheap that, yeah, I think that they're definitely viable depending on where the ownership comes in. If they're over 10% owned, I probably don't really want to touch any of the Detroit running backs against the Cardinals defense. But if they're under 10% owned, I think I might have some interest in Craig Reynolds in particular, and then maybe Godwin as well. How about you?
I got 0 touches for Jamar Jefferson last week. It was a play that I gave up on well early in that game. As soon as Craig Reynolds got all of the touches on the first, and I was like, oh, this is going to go poorly. And especially because I'd played the late slate last week also, and I just knew this is just not going to be my day. So yeah, if Jamal Williams is in, I'm going to like him. Also, I think he has a good amount of pass catching upside in this matchup. I'm assuming he doesn't play right now. And if that is the case, then Reynolds is going to be the guy for me. I'm just going to assume something similar to what happened last week. And, who knows, maybe go one of those Ian Rappaport tweets that are always inaccurate that tells us other information. Do you think this is going to be a slate where you spend up at the running back position very much? Because Najee Harris is kind of on an island by himself, just in terms of pricing. There aren't that many running backs to pay up for, and there's certainly none of those really high-end running backs to play. Number one, all of them are hurt at this time of year. Number two, there's a bunch of guys out. So we're looking at the pricing over on DK. We've got Najee Harris at 7,800. You got Zeke at 73, Elliott at 72. Do you see yourself frequently getting all the way up to Najee Harris?
Um, I think so. I think I'll get to some Najee Harris. It's not a spot that I really love, but there aren't that many spots on the slate as a whole that I really love. There aren't that many really cheaper running backs that I'm like, I need to play 50% of this guy. Outside of James Robinson, there's not really that many running backs that I love. So I think that is a spot that I would be okay paying up there. I don't think I'm going to have a ton. So we have Najee projected for 19.5% ownership, 8.5% boom probability, 18% optimal lineup probability. So slight negative play there. But it wouldn't surprise me if I get up close to the field on Najee Harris against the Titans defense. Yeah, I think I'll get to some Najee Harris. Zeke, I don't really know what to make of it because it should be a great spot against the Giants. Like they are a bad rush defense, but Zeke also just hasn't looked that good. They don't seem like they want to give him a full workload, so I'm not in love with it. I think I'll play some Zeke just because the price is right, the spot is right. I think I'm going to go there despite all of my reservations. And yeah, I think Joe Mixon looks okay. The Broncos rush defense hasn't been that great. We've got Joe Mixon at, actually I got to look over here now. Okay, his projected ownership has come up a lot in this latest run. We now have him up to 8.9% projected ownership, up from 3.5% the last time I looked. So don't love that, but it is a slight positive leverage spot, 9.3% chance of being in the optimal lineup. So I kind of like Joe Mixon against the Broncos rush defense. And then even Cordarrelle Patterson, yeah, I think that I will probably play some Cordarrelle Patterson, maybe as a run back in my Jimmy G lineups. Not a play that I really love though. Are any of those guys that really appeal to you?
Like, could Zeke just be cheaper? He sucks, and it seems like a pretty good situation for him. And then you got Tony Pollard, who most people in the DFS industry are on board with. Tony Pollard, better overall player than Zeke at this point in his career, but Zeke is just the better fantasy option because he's getting more of the touches and more of the workload. But he's so expensive now on FanDuel and DK, and he just sucks every week. And but last week was terrible for me. I played a bunch of Zeke last week without Tony Pollard there, and he just sucked. He wasn't able to get anything going. He had 12 carries for 45 yards. I really think they tried to give him opportunities against Washington. The game script set up well for him. They won the game 27-20, but how often can you run a running back when he's consistently rushing for under 4 yards per carry? So I'd rather play Joe Mixon if I'm playing somebody in that price range. I'd rather play Najee Harris if I'm playing somebody in that price range. And he's just my least favorite guy of the guys who are around him.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, man, Tony Pollard, am I going to get sucked in there again? It's 5,800, so it's not like he's super cheap. But Zeke has just looked so banged up, and now Tony Pollard's in the same spot. Would it be that shocking to see? I mean, we've been saying this for 2 years now. Maybe this is the week Tony Pollard gets bigger share than he's been getting because he's so clearly the better back. I don't know. I'm just thinking kind of outside the conversation of the top running backs. Since we're talking about Zeke, now you got me thinking maybe I will consider a little bit of Tony Pollard. Is that too crazy in a Millie Maker type contest?
I wouldn't say it's too crazy. He is a little expensive. Like I wouldn't be super heavy on Tony Pollard. If you have a few lineups with him, I don't think it's a big deal. He's only projected for 1.5% ownership. And it's more a situation where just his prices come up and he's hurt himself. Don't forget, he has that plantar fascia injury, which is generally a very difficult injury to deal with because it lingers. You have to play through a lot of pain. So that's something else that could cause the Cowboys to limit. They've got two pretty banged up running backs. It's a situation that overall I don't love. There's so many timeshare situations at running back though. We've got the Dallas situation. We've got the Denver situations going on now with Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. There's been the Tennessee situation where they've got Foreman and Hilliard. And in general, I don't really love to attack those timeshare type of situations, especially when we've got running backs, kind of the starter and the backup are both expensive in a lot of those spots.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I like to target those situations when it's a situation where sometimes one of the backs will get the big workload, like the hot hand approach. I like taking advantage of the hot hand approach. I don't really think that these are those kind of spots. We haven't really seen it happen where Javonte Williams takes on like all of the carries because he's playing well while Melvin Gordon is healthy. So I think I'm with you that, yeah, in these situations, I don't really love any of them. I'll sprinkle them in my lineups. I'm going to have some Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon as well. But yeah, in general, I'm with you, and that's probably a good reason to stay away from Tony Pollard, I think is the point that you were making, not so much about these other guys, but yeah, I think he's not somebody I'm going to have a ton of, especially with his own injury.
And one other guy I want to talk about here before we move on, or I could ask if you have any other running backs you want to talk about, but you mentioned his name really briefly before, but Jeff Wilson. There's no Eli Mitchell, there's no Raheem Mostert, there's no Trey Sermon. All of these running backs are banged up for the 49ers. It's a positive matchup against the Falcons. We saw opportunity for Jeff Wilson last week. He just wasn't super effective. He didn't score a touchdown, but still, he ended up getting 13 carries for 56 yards. Considering this matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, and it's a game we currently have the 49ers favored by 9 points, there's not a lot of ownership going to Jeff Wilson, and that is somebody who I want to be overweight to the field on. We've seen him have success in the past, and I'm just going to look at last week as a game where, hey, he just wasn't able to get it going, but he clearly seems to be the lead back right now, which is enough for me to have the confidence to get him into my player pool.
Yeah, so on my sheet from my research I was doing an hour ago, I had Jeff Wilson at 3.8% ownership. We now have him up to 16% ownership in the Boom Bust tool in DraftKings. So it has come up significantly. I had a lot of interest in him previously. If we have it at 16% or in this range tomorrow, that might drive me away from Jeff Wilson a little bit. That's a little bit too high in our tools. He has gone from being somebody who was pretty neutral to positive leverage to, if he's at 16% ownership, we've got a 6.1% boom probability, 11.2% optimal lineup probability. That's going to drive me away from Jeff Wilson a little bit against the Falcons, but it's still such a great spot. He is a dynamic running back. He's 5,000. He's a fine play. Even if he is at the 16% ownership, I will have some Jeff Wilson just because I think that he's a guy who can really, he is the kind of guy that can break the slate in this kind of matchup, assuming health. I played a lot of JaMycal Hasty last week and didn't go so well. He did have 3 receptions.
It's cool that we played some of these running backs that just didn't play last week.
Yeah, it was really fun. Yeah, he had 1 or 2 carries, I think, and then 3 receptions. I might try it again, just because he's still going to have 0. We have JaMycal Hasty projected for 0.4% ownership. He's 4,200. The running back in front of him is injury prone. It's a great matchup. I'm a sucker. I'm probably going to play a little bit of JaMycal Hasty again, but not with a ton of confidence. Not somebody that I highly recommend. Just somebody that if he's coming in at 0.4% ownership, I think that playing him at 2% probably makes sense. Probably not 19%, but playing a little bit of JaMycal Hasty, I think makes a little bit of sense as well.
Yeah, as it currently stands, there are only 2 running backs in our Boom Bust tool on DK that are projected for more than 10% of a boom score. That is Jamal Williams and James Robinson, and Jamal Williams' status currently up in the air a little bit. And then going over to FanDuel, where the numbers always look a little bit different between FanDuel and DraftKings, just because of the overall pricing and the salary differences. But we have over on FanDuel, James Robinson projected for a 31.7% boom score, by far the highest of any running back. Then we've got Zeke at 13.9%, Jamal Williams 12.2%, and nobody else on the slate with double-digit boom score. So certainly something that's going to make the running back position hard to find those can't-miss type plays that have missed in the past at times, but they can't miss plays at least before the slate starts. Anybody else a running back that we should be bringing up that you think is going to be big parts of your build?
I don't know if there's anybody else who's going to be a big part of my build. I have a little bit of interest in Myles Gaskin at 5,600 against the Jets, but with Malcolm Brown coming back, we don't really know that he's going to have the huge role that we're hoping that he has. And he is Myles Gaskin projected for 17.4% ownership, 11.5% chance of being in the optimal lineup. He's pretty negatively leveraged there, so not somebody that I really love. Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned all of the Arizona back situation. I'm gonna like somebody from Arizona. It just all kind of depends on how that situation comes out. Michael Carter, coach came out and said he's going to have a significant role. If you believe he's going to have a significant role, he's 4,700 against the Dolphins. He is projected for 14.6% ownership, a pretty big negative leverage play on the slate. But if you really believe the coach that he's going to come back and immediately have a significant role, you could do worse. And then I do have some interest in David Johnson, just because the Texans are playing the Jaguars. I always like these messy matchups. We've talked about this in the past. I like the place where it's bad teams and nobody wants to play them. Except for obviously James Robinson in this spot, everybody does want to play. Wouldn't be that shocking to me to see David Johnson have a better game even than James Robinson. I think that he's a decent enough running back in a great spot at 4,900 against this Jaguars defense. So I'm going to have some interest in David Johnson, but not he's not a great running back at this stage of his career. It's just the spot. It wouldn't surprise me if he puts up a big game. Do you think you'll get to any David Johnson?
Well, I could check the current build I have, and not really. If it is, it's going to be a really small percentage. But in the build that I have made right now, he's not really popping up for me at all. There's other places I prefer to get to at the running back position. But once again, I'm pretty spread out outside of James Robinson. James Robinson popping up right now in about a little more than half my lineups. And then it's a whole bunch of guys that are in the teens.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then if James Robinson is out, do you think you're going to be loading up on Dare Agumbawale? I think he would be the lead back there if James Robinson is out. Do you think he would get the same kinds of opportunities, or do you think that would just be they're going to throw it more?
Yes and no. So I think I would want to get to him, but at the same time, I do think we'd also encourage him to throw the ball more. And then maybe it would be, hey, I want to get some more Laviska Shenault because that's always worked well in the past. But I do think that your thought process before about trying to play some of the Jaguars passing game to get off of a potential really chalky James Robinson would be sensible. Actually, that does bring me back. There is one thing I want to ask you about James Robinson and the passing game for the Jaguars. Would you be willing to play James Robinson with Trevor Lawrence as a stacking option?
Yeah, I think I would be. I mean, for the most part, if I'm playing Trevor Lawrence, it is as leverage off of James Robinson. So I think that I would prefer to play Trevor Lawrence without James Robinson. But it is a situation sort of similar to, I mean, in some ways, it's similar to the situation we had a couple weeks ago with Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara, where they both could do it independently. Like, it wouldn't be surprising to see Trevor Lawrence throw it to James Robinson a lot, but Trevor Lawrence also can run. Maybe they're going to run more. Maybe that's going to be the change that happens, is that they're going to be more willing to run with their quarterback. And he could certainly do it against the Texans defense. They could do it even if they're, not hooking up a lot on touchdowns from Lawrence to Robinson. It wouldn't be surprising to see both of them get there just at their both having low salaries. So you could do the play, hoping that Lawrence does throw it to James Robinson some, and then it could work out even if it doesn't go that way. So I don't hate the idea of pairing James Robinson with Trevor Lawrence. Do you think you would do it at all?
Yeah, he's a capable pass catcher. It was something I hadn't really thought about much before, but as I think through it now, I like James Robinson, but it looks like he's going to be really popular, and he could get it done catching passes. We've seen him do that in the past. We've seen James Robinson have as many as 6 targets this year. We saw him have some games with a couple receiving touchdowns last year. So I don't have any kind of issue with that. And I think that is something they'll be looking to do to differentiate some of my James Robinson lineups. Not that it's going to be my most used way to get to James Robinson, but it's certainly going to be in consideration for me. Guys, I would be remiss if I did not point out that the sponsor of today's show is No House Advantage. If you guys are unfamiliar with NHA, it's a different way to play DFS. These are prop-based daily fantasy sports contests where we've got over 500 props to pick from each week. They've got everything over on No House Advantage. We also got free projections for it over on awesemo.com that you could use to help build some of your NHA lineups. There's still tournaments with pretty big payouts to first place. And the way it works, you build these lineups with prop cards. You give them a confidence interval of 1 to 10. The prop you're most confident, you give it 10 points. If that hits, you get 10 points for your lineup. The 8-point prop hits, you get 8 points, so on and so forth. And if you are signing up for the first time, use the promo code AWESOME to get up to $25 bonus on your first deposit. So go download the app and check out No House Advantage. All right, let's head on over to these wide receivers now, Neil. And Cooper Kupp was going to be somebody that I was going to get to a ton in my lineups. Obviously, that game isn't happening anymore, so that limits the amount that I would be getting to Cooper Kupp to 0. But here's where that's really impacting my lineups. Guys like Deebo Samuel, Davante Adams. I now have extra money to spend at the wide receiver position without the super high ceiling and floor of Cooper Kupp. This now bumps up my exposure to guys like Deebo Samuel, Davante Adams. I'm going to be cheaper at running back, paying up at wide receiver. Does this all make sense to you? And is there one of these high-end receivers you prefer over the other?
Yeah, so I think Deebo is probably my favorite of the expensive receivers. He just looks really good in the boom bust tool. We do have him projected now for his ownership has gone up to 18.1% projected ownership, but he's still at 21.6% chance of being in the optimal lineup. So he's a pretty positively leveraged play. I think I'm going to want to play some Deebo against the Falcons. We've already talked about how we both like Jimmy Garoppolo. Makes a lot of sense to play Deebo with Jimmy Garoppolo, who won't have a ton of ownership. So I think Deebo is my favorite, but I also really like the Aaron Rodgers to Davante Adams stacks. I think I'm going to be playing plenty of them. We have him in the optimal lineup 27.2% of the time, Davante Adams. We do have him at 26.2% ownership, so it's not a hugely positively leveraged spot, but still 27.2. If you get different elsewhere, I think that's a really nice spot to go. And you can get different elsewhere, like I said, by playing Aaron Rodgers with him. We don't have him projected for a ton of ownership. So I do really like the the thought of Devontae Adams with Aaron Rodgers as well. I think those two are my favorites. Stephon Diggs doesn't look that great in the tools. He's slightly negative leverage. We already talked about how they spread it around a little bit too much for our comfort. Deontay Johnson is now one of the more expensive receivers on the slate. He hasn't really been recently. That's kind of a new thing. He doesn't look that great. Do you have any preference among the expensive guys?
I think it's going to be Adams for me, mostly because I like Deebo Samuel. He's actually, if I go through my exposures right now in the build I made, my most rostered wide receiver, Devontae Parker. Number 2 is Devontae Adams. 3 is Deebo Samuel. But the reason I get to more Adams than Samuel is I just have more confidence in Aaron Rodgers as a pass thrower than I do with Jimmy Garoppolo. So I'll be making some 49er stacks because of the size of the slate, but I just prefer the Packers in their situation. And the other thing, too, with Deebo Samuel, I'm a little concerned with how they're using him as of late. Like, I get the rushing numbers have been great, but it's a little concerning when you're playing somebody wide receiver who isn't catching passes anymore. The last 3 games, he has 1 reception, 1 reception, 1 reception. Do I want to be that reliant on somebody to have 2 touchdowns on 8 carries? I think this could be a little bit of a trap to be playing Deebo as just an individual option. Does that concern you at all, his workload in the passing game as of late?
Yeah, I didn't realize it had gotten that bad. So that actually does concern. That brings down his floor considerably if he's not catching passes. It's good that they're trying to keep him involved. They seem to understand that he is their most dynamic playmaker, so they are getting him involved. That's obviously a huge positive. But if they're not throwing him the ball, that really lowers his floor because he is going to be touchdown dependent. Obviously, you can get the 100-yard bonus rushing, I guess, but yeah, that does concern me a little bit. But I think I'm still going to get there just because the matchup is so good that I think that they should be able to do whatever they want, and what they want to do seems to be to get Deebo Samuel involved. So I think I'm still going to have a ton of Deebo Samuel, but yeah, that should cause some concern. I think just that you kind of need the guys who are getting at least 6-7 catches per game. That really raises the floor, and if he's not doing that anymore, I have some concern there.
The last 3 games for Deebo Samuel against the Bengals last week. 1 catch for 22 yards, but then he had 8 carries for 37 yards and a touchdown. The week before, or not the week before, the last game he played, because then he missed a game because of an injury against Minnesota. 1 catch for 12 yards, but 6 carries for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. The week before that against Jacksonville, 1 catch for 15 yards, 8 carries for 79 yards and a touchdown. I'm going to lower my exposure to Deebo Samuel after looking through some of these box scores. This is scaring the shit out of me. I don't want to be playing a wide receiver who's this expensive on FanDuel and DK that's relying on a long rush for a touchdown to basically make the value work at his salary. Do you think he gets more involved in the passing game now, or is this just what Deebo Samuel is right now?
You have to think that he's going to be like, I don't really understand it though. So it's hard to know what they're going to do because I don't understand why this would be the case at all to begin with. Like, why are they not throwing him the ball? He can clearly catch. My expectation would be that he is going to be more involved in the passing game going forward and that it's just kind of fluky, but 3 games in a row is a little bit concerning that they didn't see it once and think, oh, we need to fix that, or see it twice and think we need to fix that. They're still not throwing him the ball. Maybe they just think that they want to keep doing these weird rushing plays, but he's also not even getting that. It's not like he's getting 20 rushes a game. That's the crazy thing. You said 6 rushes, I think you said, against Minnesota. So yeah, that's not a ton of rushing opportunities either. He's such a good athlete that he's getting it done. Maybe it's because he's scoring on the rushing touchdowns that I think I said this last week, that maybe he would have more opportunities. I was speculating that maybe he wasn't catching the ball as much because he was just scoring on his rushing opportunities, and that took away opportunities for him to catch the ball more. But yeah, 3 games in a row, that's kind of concerning.
Yeah, we have not seen him with multiple catches in a game since week 10 against the Rams. We had 5 catches for 97 yards. And it's not like that was a massive amount of value either, a massive amount of volume either. He was targeted 5 times. He caught all 5 of them for 97 yards. But lack of work in the passing game is starting to concern me a little bit here with Deebo Samuel. Looking at the other guys in the wide receiver position, a lot of them we've talked about already. I like DJ Moore. I like getting to Rondale Moore and Christian Kirk. I have a preference to Rondale Moore. The situation with the Cardinals, obviously, is there's no DeAndre Hopkins. He is not expected to play for the remainder of the regular season, potential to come back for the playoffs, which the Cardinals will be involved in. If we're not talking about a stacking option with Kyler Murray, we're just talking about standalone wide receiver, Rondale Moore, Christian Kirk. I know you said you prefer Rondale Moore. Does that mean that you don't like Christian Kirk, or do you think you're going to be getting to both of these guys?
Oh, I think I'm going to be playing plenty of both of them. I like taking advantage of Lions matchups. Christian Kirk isn't that expensive either, 5,300. He is the wide receiver one, maybe wide receiver two, because they also have AJ Green there. I don't know. AJ Green seems to be getting more and more involved. I'm going to be playing all three of them. I think my order of preference is Rondale Moore, just because we have him projected for 6% ownership at 4,400 with a 12.1% chance of being in the optimal lineup. So I think Rondale Moore is my number one, probably followed by AJ Green. We have AJ Green. He's 4,900, 9% projected ownership with 11.5% chance of being in the top lineup. And then Christian Kirk would be third, just because we have him projected for 19.8% ownership, and he's the most expensive, 5,300, 17% chance of being in the optimal lineup. But I like all of them. I'm going to be playing plenty of all of them, both in my Kyler lineups and individually outside of the Kyler lineups. Do you have what's your order of those three?
It is Rondale Moore 1, Christian Kirk 2, AJ Green 3. AJ Green did get a lot of targets last week, 10 targets, caught 7 of them for 102 yards. I do feel Rondale Moore is a little bit of a trap for me from this sense. Sometimes I really project on teams and I want them to do what I would like them to do, meaning I like Rondale Moore so much. I say, you know what? The Cardinals should really like Rondale Moore. They should throw him the ball a whole bunch. But I kind of look at it similar to an NBA DFS situation that I had with like Şengün recently, where everybody loves Şengün. I think he might be the best player on the Houston Rockets. Doesn't matter. They don't play him a lot of minutes. So we'll see some of these slates where everybody just gives Şengün a bunch of minutes in their projections because they would like him to play more minutes. And the slate actually happens and Şengün plays 15 minutes. So I'm going to be playing Rondale Moore, but I might dial back the current exposure I have a little bit just because I have him in 30% of my lineups right now. And I'm concerned that he's not going to get the volume I would like him to get.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the other point in favor of Rondale Moore would be just because if their running game is banged up, they might try to get it to Rondale Moore short a little bit more, use him as sort of the run game. But yeah, 30% is a lot. I can understand why you would have some reservations there. And you're right, it could be a Şengün type of situation where it's just like, man, he's so good. They need to get him the ball. They're going to get him the ball more, right? And then they just don't. So it is certainly something that we need to be a little bit wary of.
Time is flying on this show, so we don't have infinite amount of time left. But are there any other wide receivers that are really important to you that we should be talking about here?
I kind of like the Cowboys receivers. CeeDee Lamb looks pretty good. I'm trying to find how things have changed. Everything's changed drastically since I did my research, so now I have to find them. But yeah, he still looks fine. 10.9% chance of being optimal. Amari Cooper was looking pretty good. Michael Gallup actually has a 6.1% chance of being in the optimal lineup. He's no longer looking. I was going to say he looks best. He doesn't look the best any longer. I have some interest in all of them. You could play the Bengals. You can always play Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd looks okay. We talked about DJ Moore. Marquise Brown was really popping earlier. I'm going to try to find if that is still the case. Earlier, I was thinking that he looked really interesting. I could play him in some Lamar stacks. His ownership has come up to 6.6. It's more than doubled what we had him at earlier. So not quite as good as he was looking earlier. I'm going to play some Brandon Cooks just in those. If I have Trevor Lawrence, I think Brandon Cooks is a fine run back option. I have some interest in Julio Jones and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine against the Steelers. Both look pretty okay. And then I mentioned that there's a chance I'm going to play a little bit of Teddy Bridgewater again. I think that if I do, it will be with Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton. Both look like decent plays. Oh, Sterling Shepard. Maybe you mentioned him. I haven't said the name. He looks pretty decent. We're projecting him for 10% ownership with a 12.2% chance of being in the optimal lineup. So Sterling Shepard is somebody that I will have some of just because 4,700 is a little bit too cheap for him in this situation. Jamison Crowder looks fine at 5%. I mentioned I'm going to be playing Trevor Lawrence. I'm probably going to be playing some Marvin Jones. I might try some Laviska Shenault and just hope that they try to get him involved in different ways than they have been. He didn't look great. I watched the game last week, and I didn't think that Laviska looked too great when they did target him, but maybe if they change things up, maybe he'll do better under this new coaching staff. Anybody else that you have a lot of interest in?
Amon-Ra St. Brown is making in some of my lineups. He's been getting so many targets as of late that it kind of makes him tough for me to stay away from, particularly on DK. FanDuel maybe a little bit less so, but DK where it's a full point PPR. Last 2 weeks, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 12 targets in each of them. That's a lot of volume, and this is another game where they're most likely going to be playing from behind. So just based on volume, I think that he could get there. So that's the one guy we haven't mentioned that I'm overweight to right now.
Yeah, he looks great in the tools too. 7.7% projected ownership with a 10% chance of beating the optimal lineup. And we talked about Devontae Parker earlier when we were talking about Tua, but I should reiterate that he does look like he has a really good chance of being in the optimal lineup, but slight negative leverage. So you can actually no, it has flipped now. Now he has slight positive leverage. So Devontae Parker, 29.1% chance of being in the optimal lineup, 28.3% projected ownership at 4,300. I think Devontae Parker is somebody you can play, and then also Albert Wilson in that game looks fine in the tools.
All right, let's head on over to the tight ends. And I know we're running short on time. I don't have that much to say about tight ends anyway. Mike Gesicki, I think he's a great tight end option that I really want to be pairing with Tua and Devontae Parker. I think that's a stacking option. Makes a whole lot of sense for tournaments. Also very cost effective. If I'm paying up, I'm going to get to George Kittle. I think George Kittle, kind of no-brainer if you have the space to pay up for him. His workload the last couple of weeks has been totally ridiculous. And remember, there was that narrative George Kittle couldn't catch touchdown passes. Well, that's gone. He catches touchdown passes every week now. And the last 2 games, 12 targets, 15 targets for Kittle, ended up with 9 catches for 181 yards and 2 touchdowns, 13 catches for 151 yards and a touchdown. Gesicki and George Kittle, that's where the bulk of my tight end exposure is going to be this weekend.
Yep, I think that makes a lot of sense. They look the best in the tools. They have the 2 highest boom probabilities on the slate. I'm going to be playing tons of Gesicki and George Kittle. I would also throw in there, I mentioned him earlier, Zach Ertz. I have some interest in if he plays, which we're expecting him to. Kyle Pitts always looks pretty good in the tools. He hasn't really been doing it lately. I keep thinking one of these games he's going to break out. He hasn't done it yet, but I'm probably going to throw some Kyle Pitts back out there. And Dalton Schultz also looks pretty good against the Giants. I mentioned that I like several options on the of the Dallas receiving options. I think Dalton Schultz looks pretty good too, which now I'm thinking, should I be playing more Dak Prescott? Maybe something that I'll look into later. But yeah, I think Dalton Schultz kind of interests me too. But yeah, no other options that really stand out as plays that I'm super interested in.
Yeah, so for me in the current build I have, it's Gesicki and Kittle. Like I said, they make up a lot of my lineups. I don't have a single other tight end that I have in my lineups more than 10%. It's just mix and match with other guys who fit into individual stacks. But I think certainly the guys who you want to be playing for the most part, Gesicki and Kittle. DSTs, we get hit on them. And then also, I don't want to go too long here because I know that we have some shuffling that's gone on the YouTube channel today, which happens when games just get canceled and everything gets moved around. And all of a sudden, we've got different shows in different time slots. So don't want to be running long because they'll be cutting into somebody else's show. But DSTs, any strong takes here? I absolutely hate the position as per usual.
Yeah, I like the Steelers. If I'm going to say one defense that I like, they look the best in the boom bust tool. That is still the case. Glad to see that because they make sense against the Titans. I think they're going to be able to force some turnovers. Hopefully, we've got them projected for 5% ownership with a 7% chance of being in the optimal lineup. They look fine at 3,000. And the Cardinals always look, I don't know if they look good in the tools, but I always like picking on Detroit. I've said it several times now. Yeah, they're actually negatively leveraged in the tools. We have them projected for 5.4% ownership. Sometimes I like paying up a little bit to get contrarian. It's not that contrarian today, but I think I'll still probably play some Cardinals against Detroit.
But paying up for defense, I'm getting to a lot of Dolphins right now. They're going up against the Jets. We know how turnover prone Zach Wilson is. I know he's looked a little bit better in recent weeks, but still, we're talking about a guy who almost certainly would have ended up leading the league in turnovers had he not gotten hurt earlier in the year. So I like getting to some of the Dolphins here. And I kind of like Dolphins onslaught stacks. We haven't given out a stack like this before, but you know how we like to close the show, Neil. If you were playing one tournament lineup, what would be the GPP stack you go with? Dolphins onslaught for me. Tua Tagovailoa, Dolphins defense, Mike Gesicki, Devontae Parker. Dolphins go out and win the game like 30-0 or something like that. That's what I'm banking on. How about you?
I like that. I'll go with Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to go Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to go Devontae Adams, and I'm going to go Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I think that they could get it done at really low ownership, so I have some interest there. I think that's where I'll go.
Yep, and I have no issue with that either. That was actually the second one that I was contemplating. Instead, I want to go with the Rodgers and Adams combination. If we had that Rams game still, that would have been the direction it went. But obviously, that's not an option. But for me, it's that Dolphins onslaught stack. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You're going to want to check out all our content tomorrow because in this day and age, things are going to change. Good luck this weekend.